Our story begins with Satomi, an ordinary high school boy who was forced to move into his own place. But as a broke high schooler, he can only afford a cheap room at the Corona complex. And on his first night in his new place, Satomi sleeps peacefully, unaware that his room is shaking violently for some reason. The next day, to make some extra cash, he takes a job at an archaeological dig site with Kenji, his childhood friend, who tries to spook Satomi by telling him that the room he rented is said to be haunted, but Satomi just dismisses these rumors. While working on the dig site, however, he gets distracted by a strange voice calling out his name, and falls down. He wakes up moments later slightly dazed, and finds a statue of a woman who tells him that she has been waiting forever for him. But as he reaches out to touch the strange being, she vanishes, and he finds himself waking up in a hospital bed, with Kenji by his side, who informs him that he hit his head and passed out at work. The next day, Satomi is discharged from the hospital thanks to a quick recovery and heads to school with his friends, but is unknowingly being spied on by a girl with binoculars. After school, Satomi decides to ditch his friend so he can apply to join the knitting club, where he meets Harumi, a young girl who has a frail body and regularly goes to the hospital for checkups, which is where she first became familiar with Satomi. Meanwhile, Satomi is once again being spied on by someone else. When he returns home afterwards, Satomi hears a girl's voice coming from his room and overhears her plans to spook him. But he catches her off guard instead and tosses her out. This doesn't accomplish much, however, as the girl can simply pass through things. She introduces herself as Sanae and explains to Satomi that she lives in his room as a ghost. This leads to the two of them bickering over who gets to live in the room, until escalating to Sanae using her poltergeist attacks against Satomi, which he dispels by using blessed charms gifted to him by his grandmother. And as the tension increases and the two prepare their next moves, another girl breaks through his window. She introduces herself as Yurika, the clumsy magical girl who is also the princess of love and courage. She then explains to Satomi that magical energy has been accumulating in his room for some time now, and that she's come to release it. Instead, Satomi throws her out and continues his fight with Sanae, believing Yurika to be just a crazy cosplayer. But after taking pity on her and letting her back inside, another girl bursts through Satomi's floor and introduces herself as Kiriha, the descendant of Earth people. She further explains that Satomi's room is the exact location of an important shrine for her and her people, and that in exchange for his room, Satomi would be rewarded with gold bars. Tempted by her offer, he begins to think it over, but after finding out that Kiriha is planning on invading the world, he refuses to give up his room, despite her convincing arguments. Suddenly, a blue symbol appears on the wall, and a blonde-haired girl startles Satomi by slipping through it. She introduces herself as Theia before summoning her Blue Knight to attack the group. But after some explosive back and forths, a girl named Ruth steps through the blue symbol as well and tells Theia to knock it off, but she refuses to do so. All the fighting finally comes to an end, however, when SHIZUKA, Satomi's classmate and landlord, furiously barges into the room and forces them to stop being so noisy by making them all sign a peace treaty. Afterwards, Ruth explains that Theia is going through a trial in their home world, and will inherit the throne if she succeeds, and for some reason needs Satomi to give up his apartment in order to do so. But he obviously refuses, because if Kiriha's massive plot can't convince him to give up his room, nothing can. In order to prevent further bickering, however, the group agrees to split the apartment among themselves, and they play a game to determine who receives which areas of Satomi's tiny room. And at the end of the night, Satomi finally manages to get some much-needed sleep. The next day at school, Satomi participates in the knitting club's after-school activities and hangs out with Harumi while once again being spied on by Yurika. Meanwhile, Theia and Ruth spy on Satomi as well, while scheming of ways to make him pledge his loyalty to Theia. But despite their stalker behavior, once Satomi returns home, he's surprised to see that all his new roommates seem to be getting along with each other. They eat dinner and banter together without bickering, and even invite Yurika to eat with them instead of letting her sulk in the closet. The group then ends the night by playing games together once more, and Sanae in particular seems to have grown quite fond of Satomi. But just as everything seemed to be going well, the next day Satomi is depressed to learn that Yurika, Kiriha, Theia, and Ruth are all new transfer students in his class and are posing as normal students to disrupt his school life as well. Even Sanae joins them by putting on a schoolgirl outfit, despite no one else being able to see her. Throughout their first day of school, Theia and Ruth deal with the boys' intimidating cheer squad, while Yurika runs into the cosplay club and is immediately recruited by them. At home, the girls eventually start getting tired of playing cards every night, so Kiriha suggests that they partake in the school's upcoming marathon as a friendly competition. Everyone is thrilled by this idea, with Satomi and Theia in particular being excited to show off what they've got. And at school the next day, Harumi gets flustered when Satomi expresses that he needs her. Initially believing this to be a confession of love, her shock quickly fades when she realizes that Satomi simply needs her to win the marathon. Meanwhile, Kiriha trains to become the representative of the school's track team, without letting her physics-defying milkers get in the way. On the day of the fated marathon, the boys' intimidating cheer squad, who appeared to be stoic and reserved at first, declare Theia to be their princess and pledge their loyalty to her. Meanwhile, Yurika rolls in with the cosplay club while crying. When the race finally begins, Kiriha gains a quick lead by paying off a bunch of people to pile up at the stairs, but Theia charges through the pile by getting a lift from the chief of the boys' simp squad. Meanwhile, Satomi carries Harumi over the pile while Shizuka, Kenji, and Yurika are left behind. As the race continues, Satomi finds himself stopped by a few obstacles, and encourages Harumi to go ahead without him, which she reluctantly agrees to do. But Satomi soon catches back up to her and defeats Theia and her weirdly shaped horse in an obstacle course and goes on ahead of both girls. At that same time, Sanae floats around and admires Satomi as she watches him give his all to win this competition. Meanwhile, Harumi finds Yurika wobbling around in a maid outfit that the cosplay club had forced her to wear, and Yurika is grateful when Harumi offers to finish the race together. However, Harumi eventually kneels over and passes out due to her frail body, forcing Yurika to use her magical girl powers to heal her, and reveals her powers to Harumi in the process. Meanwhile, as Satomi approaches the finish line, he mistakenly believes he's crossed it and immediately faints. Seeing that their main competition is knocked out, Kiriha and Theia decide to battle over first place. But while they're distracted, Harumi and Yurika carry a somewhat lifeless Satomi over the finishing line, granting the victory to both the knitting and the cosplay club. And after all this, the gang just goes back to playing their usual card games anyways. Sometime later, the group gets invited to a hot springs resort and agree to go in order to unwind. Once they arrive at the inn, however, they're disappointed to find that the room is the same size as Satomi's apartment. Down at the beach, the girls attempt to show off their swimsuits to Satomi, but find that he can't seem to take his eyes off Harumi. To punish him, the girls decide to bury Satomi in the sand for not paying enough attention to them. During their torture session, however, they get interrupted by two Discord moderators in glasses and fedoras, who attempt to catch the girls, but fail miserably. And after the typical hot spring scenes that I can't show on YouTube, the group heads to bed, where Ruth is abruptly awakened by Satomi inadvertently touching her in his sleep. But when it's revealed that Satomi was actually just dreaming about beetles rather than any of the girls, Ruth becomes pissed that Satomi likes beetles more than her. After the misunderstanding is cleared and the girls head back to bed, Satomi meets Kiriha at the side of a cliff. As they talk, Sanae attempts to shock them, but is instead shocked herself by the charms that Satomi wears around his neck. This leads to an argument the next morning, as Sanae believes that Satomi wears those charms because he hates her, causing her to run off crying. Unfortunately, she is soon captured by the two strange men from the previous day, who explain that they are ghost hunters who want to sell Sanae off for a big payday. Meanwhile, while the rest of the group is out enjoying their time at the beach, Sanae is taken away by the two men. In their car, she meets another ghost lady, who convinces her that no one is coming to save her because no one wants to be near ghosts. Meanwhile, Satomi and Harumi talk about Sanae's sudden disappearance, and he reminisces about them goofing off together. This motivates him to search for her, but on his way back to the inn he runs into the cosplay club toying with Yurika once again, and wisely chooses to ignore them. Once at the room, Satomi packs up his various charms, and accidentally blows up the room in the process. Afterwards, the girls decide to also team up with him, and they go off to find Sanae. But while the group is out searching for her, the ghost lady continues to lower Sanae's sense of worth by revealing that she was also an unwanted ghost, and that humans and ghosts are eternal enemies. Suddenly, Satomi and the gang break into the area where Sanae is being kept, and start fighting off against waves of evil spirits. When Satomi charges in to save Sanae, however, the ghost lady turns into a terrifying creature made of purple fire and consumes Sanae's energy to grow even stronger. But thanks to some quick thinking, Satomi flashes his charms at the giant demon ghost and stuns her momentarily. Using this opening, Satomi then converts the charm's energy into a celestial blade, which he flings at the demon, piercing it and freeing his friend. Afterwards, Sanae cries tears of joy as she is relieved that her friends actually came back to save her. And after their lives return to what only anime would consider normal, Sanae finds herself clinging to Satomi even more than before. Sometime later, Satomi asks the gang to help him work on a play for the school festival, and they agree. Afterwards, Yurika asks Satomi if she's allowed to bring a pet into their apartment. But when she reveals that the pet is actually a beetle, Satomi becomes nervous that Ruth might find out and get angry, so the group scrambles to hide it. Later that night, Yurika, Sanae, and Satomi all do their best to come up with ideas for the play, while Theia surprisingly also tries her best to help out. The next day at school, the gang prepares for the school festival by determining who will act out which roles in the play, with Yurika being cast as a background character and Satomi being cast as the lead. Later that same evening, Satomi and Harumi talk on the school rooftop about their roles in the play, and express how they are both simultaneously nervous and excited about it. The next day, Theia brings a bag of props to school for the play, but when she sees Satomi, she becomes flustered as she is reminded of the Blue Knight from her home world, which the play is based around. Theia then spends the rest of the day privately teaching Satomi about how to embody the Blue Knight's essence, and she grows more fond of him as she watches him get a hang of the character. Meanwhile, Yurika and Sanae care for the beetle, unaware that a now furious Ruth has been watching them the whole time. Back at school, while watching Satomi and Harumi rehearse together, Theia sees parallels between a princess from her home world and Harumi and wonders why it isn't her instead. But while she's distracted by these thoughts, a light falls onto Theia and Satomi saves her just in time, which makes her feelings for him grow even stronger. Once back home, the gang discusses the situation and Theia begins to believe that her rival is behind the attempt on her life. As more time passes, the gang continues to rehearse and prepare for the actual performance. At the end of the day, Theia and Satomi stay behind to train, while Harumi slowly becomes more distant. Meanwhile, Ruth chases Yurika out of the apartment because of the beetle's presence, so the girls offer to hide her around the school. Ruth's rampage is stopped, however, when she sees Satomi and Theia dancing and bantering with one another. Suddenly, the group is alerted by a distortion in the gym when Theia's rival, Clan, appears with a weapon made from materials native to Earth. Theia immediately attempts to fight back, but Satomi stops her, and they narrowly avoid a blast from Clan's weapon. Clan then taunts Satomi by saying that he's a cheap replica of the Blue Knight while he charges at her, and to the surprise of everyone, Satomi's sword actually manages to break through Clan's defenses. In a last-ditch effort to regain the upper hand, Clan summons a weapon to assist her, but Kiriha's familiars decimate it almost immediately. This causes an explosion through which Clan escapes, but she ends up in the janitor's closet where Yurika was hiding, who proceeds to fall on Clan and accidentally knock her out. The next day, Satomi and friends are able to perform the play at the school festival, and everything goes smoothly for once. But not for long, as elsewhere, a mysterious girl uses magic to lift a giant boulder and splits it in half as she mutters about Yurika's imminent destruction. At school the next day, this mysterious girl is revealed to be MAKI, yet another new transfer student. Yurika recognizes her immediately and hugs her, as she happily states that MAKI is an evil magical girl who wants to steal Satomi's room. Later that day, the two girls confront each other, and MAKI makes it clear that she plans to destroy Yurika. And after some bantering back and forth, MAKI decides to join the cosplay club just to spite Yurika. Shortly after, Harumi spots Yurika and takes her aside, where she confides in her that she wants to get closer to Satomi, but is unable to do so due to her insecurities. In response, Yurika suggests that Harumi should go on a friendly date with Satomi. When Yurika returns home after, however, she is shocked to see that Satomi has let MAKI into their home. She tries to explain why MAKI is evil, but is constantly cut off by shenanigans, and eventually runs away in frustration. The next day, Yurika surprisingly doesn't show up to school, and instead dresses up in her magical girl uniform in order to fight MAKI. After learning about this duel, Sanae and Satomi quickly find the building that the girls are fighting in and attempt to stop the duel. Suddenly, Harumi appears out of nowhere as MAKI reveals that she took control over her body so she could use her as collateral to make sure that Satomi won't intervene. But when MAKI launches a fireball at Harumi, Yurika is actually the one who jumps in front of it to take the hit. As Satomi assesses the damages to Yurika's body, Harumi suddenly turns into a white-haired girl with magical powers. This greatly stuns the group as they watch her summon the Blue Knight's sword for Satomi and heal Yurika. Without wasting time, Satomi grabs the sword and engages MAKI in a test of strength until she eventually escapes towards Satomi's apartment. And shortly after, Harumi wakes up dazed and confused, with no memory of what just happened nor how she got here. Meanwhile at school, the girls become worried about Satomi and the others when they can't find them anywhere. Due to the anxiety caused by this, Theia finds herself thinking about kissing Satomi and is immediately embarrassed by this. At that same time, MAKI arrives in Satomi's room and begins preparing to take control of the high quantity of magic present in it. Meanwhile, Yurika explains her past to the group and says that MAKI's organization had taken her hostage, but that Yurika's mentor had sacrificed all her magic to save her, and in return, Yurika became her successor. When the group finally returns to the apartment and finds MAKI there, the battle resumes as before, except with Theia and Kiriha also joining in on the fight. Yurika and Satomi also work together this time, with Satomi providing defense against MAKI's attacks while Yurika goes on the offensive. The gang quickly outnumbers MAKI and begin to overwhelm her with their attacks. The finishing blow is dealt by SHIZUKA, however, when she arrives and sees the damage caused to the apartment. Refusing to accept defeat, MAKI uses her last bit of magic to vanish away. With the day saved and everything back to normal, Satomi and HARUMI can finally go on a friendly date together, with Yurika and Kenji tagging along to offer their support. After the date, while everyone is asleep, Kiriha speaks to her chief in command, and they explain their plans to retrieve Satomi's room by force. However, Kiriha rejects this plan and tells them there's no need to be forceful. The next day, Satomi and Kiriha spend the day hanging out together, and they eventually stop at a bench to sit and talk about their shared interests. As they talk, Satomi mentions that Kiriha was intimidating at first, but now he realizes that she's too nice to invade Earth. In response to this, Kiriha asks Satomi out on a date, and the two spend the next weekend hanging out together at a carnival, while the girls secretly follow them around. Sometime later at school, the girls discuss Christmas and what it means to different people, especially Satomi. After school, Satomi gets a job at a bakery and hands out flyers for the holidays. The next day, however, when Satomi returns home, he's shocked to find that the girls have thrown him a surprise party to show their gratitude for everything he's done for them. After the party, Satomi and HARUMI go on a walk together, and as a gift, he gives her the scarf that he knitted on his first day at the club. Suddenly, HARUMI transforms into the princess of Theia's home world, and she gifts him a sword as a token of her appreciation, which he graciously accepts. And with that, the gang ends their holiday season cramped into their little apartment, full of joy and devoid of any shenanigans. Thanks for watching. I hope to see you again in my next recaps.